Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of DevOps Unbound. DevOps Unbound is a bi-weekly video series sponsored by our good friends at Tricentis, and we discuss relevant topics in DevOps or regarding DevOps. This is our last show for 2021. It's hard to believe we've been doing DevOps Unbound now, I think, for about a year and a half, but this year went really quickly, doing 2 of these a month. So we probably did about 24 or 25 of these during the year, and it's been great. We picked, sometimes you save the best for last. We picked one of our favorite panel configurations for this one, featuring 3 really, really good friends of ours who I personally like to have on my shows and talk because they're smart and they always have great things to say. Let me introduce you to them. I'm going to kick it off with my friend Stephen Chin. Stephen, of course, is from JFrog. But Stephen, why don't you introduce yourself, a little of your background?
Yeah, so I'm VP of Developer Relations at JFrog. Been doing DevOps before it was even, there wasn't a cool name for it. And I think that the evolution of what we see really has gone from something which was bleeding edge. We were just figuring out how to release continuously, get processes, get collaboration with operations, to something that every company is doing. And it's just a matter of figuring out the right tools and processes and dodging the latest open source supply chain security attacks. So yeah, glad to be here.
Hey, Alan, I know it's not my turn yet, but I have to jump in that Stephen's name henceforth shall be Neo.
He does look a little Matrixy, yeah.
Well, bit. The new movie coming out.
It's coming out. I went to see West Side Story, but I'm looking forward to The Matrix.
Next up is my good friend Tracy Ragan. Tracy from the CDF, from DeployHub, and other places as well. Tracy, welcome. Give us a little background.
Thank you. I want to first thank the TechStrong team for inviting me here, and Tricentis for really sponsoring these events. I really appreciate being part of these panels. It's a lot of fun. Yes, I am Tracy Ragan. I am the CEO of DeployHub. My background has been in, we used to call it ALM, SEM, for pretty much my entire career. I started, I was a programmer who got drug into learning to write build scripts. I was one of those kids who liked to pull things apart because I wanted to see how they fit together. One time I pulled my mother's stove apart. She wasn't very happy about it, but it was really cool to figure out how it worked. So I've always been interested in how things are configured, and I am pretty much a configuration management, specialist.
Thank you. I hope, thank God it was an electric stove or a gas stove?
It was gas.
Oh, geez. Well, you made it through. You're here, so I guess you didn't end too well. Well,
our third panel member is also a favorite of ours. We've been interviewing him and following him around from organization to organization. It's our friend Brian Dawson, who's with the Linux Foundation. Brian, introduce yourself.
Hey, Alan, thank you for having me. Always a ball. As a matter of fact, you not only interviewed me, I've sat in your chair. We swapped out the interviewer chair at times live at conferences. But yeah, as Tracy said, I always love talking with this group. It's perfect at the end of a year while things this year haven't been perfect. We've been on an upswing after 2020. Some cool things have been happening. My background is as a developer. I like to say I'm a technologist. And my career is largely focused on optimizing software development and delivery, all the way from the tools or technology level, working on GPUs at Sony, up to the human level, as I've engaged around what is, as Stephen said before, it had a formal name, this DevOps space. So I've had the privilege of working from QA to development to services delivery to sales to marketing. So I'm proud of the fact that I've developed a 180-degree panoramic view of what the software development and delivery process looks like. So, I'm DevOps at heart, Alan, and I love to
absolutely, and through and through.
Yeah.
All right. Last but not least is my co-host for DevOps Unbound. He's the CTO here at TechStrong Group, as well as principal analyst at TechStrong Research, Mitchell Ashley. Hey, Mitchell.
Only thing I'll add is my deconstruction of my dad's tube-based GE TV did not go so well going back together. I didn't become an SRE or a sysadmin.
Yeah, or a TV repairman for that matter. Anyway,
But you
Mitchell,
got a new TV out of it, probably.
We did.
That was one good part. Mitchell's still paying for it, but yeah.
Anyway, guys, so the topic for today's show is kind of how lucky we are to have DevOps, right? And what a role DevOps has played in this whole digital transformation and this whole journey that we've been on. Well, we've been on it for years, and certainly over the last year or two, it's digital transformation has become imperative. And the question is, could we have done it without DevOps? And has DevOps done what we thought it would do, should do, and could do, and what else needs to be done? And I'm reminded, I just published a new article. I've been writing again on DevOps.com after a while, and I published a new article, Reflections, a DevOps Christmas Carol, where I'm visited by the ghost of DevOps past, present, and future. And, thinking back to when I started DevOps.com to today, where I see titles, has DevOps hit the wall? Is DevOps still relevant? Do we still need DevOps? To what the future may hold here. And, I'm old enough to know that reality never matches the hype, right? And when things get overhyped, that's creates an even bigger gap from reality, right? The more hype it gets, the bigger that gap is. And DevOps was hyped like few other things I've seen in technology over the years. So of course there's a gap. But as we sit here today, I'm interested in my panel. What do you folks think? How relevant, how successful has DevOps been in helping digital transformation, in achieving maybe some of the goals that we all thought were possible, breaking down silos and stuff like that? I'm going to go in reverse order, and I'm going to ask Brian if you don't mind kicking this off.
No, I'd love to. There's some conversation that we had a little earlier, probably before broadcast started. We still have a long way to go. So to make no illusion that the journey is complete. But I'd say it's been extremely helpful. Now, of course, keeping in mind that digital transformation is kind of this broad swath of space that means more than just software development and delivery, or even software development and delivery based activities. But I'd say that DevOps has directly helped with the pace and the continuity at which we can deliver the innovation required from DevOps transformation, but it's also helped in a lot of other areas. A few C's. It's helped with the C-suite. It's helped with culture, building a culture of collaboration. It's helped drive a focus on customers. And as you said, ultimately, it's helped build connections on multiple domains, not just with the direct software development and delivery contributors, but other stakeholders like business and technology, right? Or the company and customers. So I can go on with alliterations, calling out how DevOps has contributed directly and indirectly, and I think it'll continue to do so.
So I'm going to live up to my my Neo reputation that Mitch gave me.
I think you're going to go in the Matrix.
Yeah, and be a little bit controversial here. So maybe DevOps is over, because now that we have cloud computing, now that we're moving everything to architectures which require less hands-on maintenance, maybe we're done. I think the new machine overlords, which have AI automation, observability, they're taking care of things in our new digitally transformed cloud infrastructures. Do they really need DevOps to be successful in the future?
Absolutely.
I think I just saw a rabbit hop by.
Yeah. I think DevOps may, as a term, as a specific thing we focus on, may decline, but I wouldn't overemphasize necessarily the traditional operations component of DevOps, right? You are still going to have to conceive, plan, package, deploy in whatever form that takes. I do expect, though, Stephen, as cloud native development matures, yes, there's less infrastructure management. Yes, eventually, I think some more things will be inferred in terms of packaging and deployment. But there's always going to be people making software, and there's always going to need to be a culture of DevOps to bring that to fruition.
And there's always going to be a team of people who have to manage that. And let's visit the ghost of DevOps past. We've always done DevOps. We've just never named it. How many times in my earlier part of my career was I called because we had production problems and I was on the application team, and because I did the build and I understand the deployment, I was the one that got called. It wasn't the operations side of the house for my application. Now, what digital transformation has done, it has turned us into, we're not managing applications so much anymore. In the future, we'll manage components. So everything will be component driven, including pieces of the infrastructure. So when we think of an application now, it's going to be a set of components. It's going to be your microservices. It's going to be your database updates. It's going to be your key values. It's going to be updates that you need to make to your namespace or your pod, or even at the cluster level if your team owns their own cluster. So we're going to continue with having a conversation between the development teams and the operation teams, but the development teams now are going to be building components. So maybe we call it co-ops instead. That's not bad, right? Maybe it'll turn to something else, but we still have the role and a trusted partner on the development side. Now we call it an SRE, and somebody on the operation side who has the correct user access if they need that to pull the pieces together. I think it's harder in a digital transformation because it's component driven. We're not managing a monolithic and we're not putting it on a server. To be quite honest, that was a lot easier because every team had their own collection of servers and don't mess with it. They knew all of the pieces and parts, and the operation team would tell them, hey, we're going to do an upgrade on Windows. Is that okay with you? And they'd say yes or no. So it is changing. Digital transformation has more moving parts to manage, and the role of DevOps will continue. We may change it. We love our acronyms. We love our fancy names. We totally do. We're a really geeky community when it comes to that. But when you boil it down, it's the same thing. We're just calling it different, and really the job changes as the underlying technology shifts.
Yeah, and I was being a little bit confrontational, but again, visiting the ghost of Christmas past. So I worked in a company where we basically had everything running on a on-site mainframe, full tape backup system, complete. This was the data center of the 80s, and we had a really strong operations team. And when we started moving to the cloud, they were all afraid that they were going to lose their jobs. Like they were like, oh my God, like our jobs and our livelihood is maintaining this data center. And what we did is, as we moved to the cloud, nobody lost their jobs changed. Right now, rather than them flipping tapes and managing systems physically, what they ended up doing was maintaining, observing, keeping that 24/7 operations and supporting the development teams on remote servers. So I think that as you said, Tracy, as technical folks, we keep changing our jobs, changing the acronyms, changing the titles, but we continually find ways to add value. And that means reinventing ourselves, learning new technologies, and transforming ourselves as we digitally transform.
And which is why I've always loved this industry, because I get bored with things really easily, and you can't get bored here.
I think the idea you mentioned, we love our terms and our names. I think we've gone from DevOps being the shiny new object, the squirrel moment, to something that, to your point, recognizing that it is things that we've been doing for a long time. But I think the difference is, I think it's elevated sort of the rising tide lifts all boats. I mean, to me anyway, I have had more confirmation of things like testing is being risen in its visibility and is seen as in its importance. We talked about observability and tracing and SRE. When did developers talk about that stuff? Never, right? And those are hot topics. Those are great things. And so I think it's really helped bring people in and elevate what are all the important functions when we started DevOps at a place that we aren't going to need those things because the developers will do them all. So to me, that's really what's fundamentally changed.
And if you may, on the flip side of that, Mitch, it just triggered when is the CEO and the C-suite commonly been talking about mean time to recovery, right? And mean lead time, right? And key metrics around the software development and delivery process. And I think DevOps has really helped with building a bridge to establish an important conversation, not only between dev and ops, but between the engineering teams in the business, or technology and business. And that'll be a lasting impact. I do want to say, I love, Stephen, transforming ourselves while we digitally transform. Such an important component of it.
Spirals within spirals.
Yeah.
So guys, a couple thoughts. First of all, you know what? Old technologies never die. They just fade into the woodwork, right? They fade into the stack. And that's what I think's happened with DevOps, is it's part of the stack. It's a given now. It's not cool necessarily. It's not new. It's not, oh my God, is it real? Not real. You know, that was part of this ghost of DevOps past. 8 years ago, I was fighting with people whether or not there was such a thing as DevOps, right? And is it only for big enterprises, or is it only for startups? Is it only for developers or ops? And what the hell does security got to do with it, right? To paraphrase Tina Turner. But, so here we are, all of that, we don't argue about that no more, right? Fundamentally, it's helped. Would we have SREs but for DevOps, quite frankly? And has DevOps transcended just that? Not Kathmandu. I forgot what the official Wikipedia thing says. But the bringing together of Dev and Ops, so you have a bigger function of Dev and Ops that includes security, includes some business function, certainly includes, is SRE part of that? Is how tightly linked is cloud native with DevOps? Observability. Is that part of this kind of DevOps way of life, if you will? Down here in Florida, a lot of the boats have Salt Life. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Salt Life. You see it, stickers on it's about people who are into fishing and that whole boating, ocean life, right? It's DevOps life.
Yeah.
Right?
It is.
DevOps.
It's a family. These are not, the more that we begin to understand that the whole process is one big family. I mean, the whole DevOps movement really tried to push it. We started creating families within application teams. You had an SRE who is now the trusted partner to operations, who was working closely with the development team. An amazing shift that we should have done a long time ago. But there was such a wall between dev, test, and prod that those silos, it just wasn't seen that you could break those silos down. They're broken down now. We need to keep those silos down. We need to continue breaking them down where they are. This is why we have trouble with doing continuous deployment from testing to production, which we have to fix. Come on, people. We have to get that done. But it is a big family, and that's never going to change. That is always going to be the case, regardless of what we're writing, regardless of the technology, whether it's low code, whether it's microservices, whether it's serverless. We still have a big family. We still have to worry about security. We still have to worry about testing. We need to automate all the pieces and parts. We need to do centralized logging and reporting so everybody has visibility into everything, even before it goes out to production. So while we see, the term DevOps might be getting a little tiring. There's too many ops in my world. There's ML ops and there's GitOps. Everybody had to add ops after DevOps got popular. But whatever it is that we do, it's a family function. And the more that we see each other as one cohesive group and not in silos, the better off our end users will be, because we'll be able to deliver a much better product faster and really deliver the business agility that our end users are demanding.
Have you been talking to my wife, Tracy? I'm buying a new boat. I wanted to name it Sea Ops, and she said enough ops.
No, don't do that. Please don't do that.
We did it.
That's enough ops. It's enough ops.
Enough ops.
You have enough back problems, Alan. Let's not.
Yeah. Hey, Stephen, I want to throw it back at you, though, Stephen.
JFrog has this notion of liquid software without versions, right?
Yeah.
Can you have liquid software without DevOps?
So I think when you look at kind of where we're going with this, we early on at JFrog we developed the notion of liquid software, which was a continuous flow of software delivery, and really this is getting to what DevOps accomplishes, which is DevOps accomplishes cleanly taking software and new releases and then streaming them out to production. And if you think about that as the problem space, there's a whole bunch of other things which enter into it. So we've talked about how do you observe the systems, how do you continuously deploy to the systems, how do you maintain them in cloud architectures, and I think the biggest one, which is kind of hitting us all in the face right now, is how do you secure these systems? How do you make sure that you actually have security across the entire pipeline? And I think that the past couple of years we've seen a huge acceleration, not only in DevOps and digital transformation, but also our hacker friends have been really bored at home. They've actually made a lot of advances. So we've seen in the past year some huge supply chain security attacks, which basically have transformed the way which we look at security as an ecosystem. And I would argue that if you have folks who are getting so good at infiltrating our systems with clandestine open source malware attacks and other ways of breaking into operational systems, DevOps is basically a fundamental requirement for how you secure your systems. Because if you're not doing continuous deployment, if you don't have very short times on releases, if you're not able to respond quickly, if you don't have your developers also looking at security information, how can you possibly secure things? And our research team just found a huge new exploit that they published a couple of days ago in NPM, where they found a bunch of heavily obfuscated malware done by folks who obviously are well funded, very smart people, and very hard to discover. So, I mean, these sort of attacks now are moving up the chain, and it's affecting our development lifecycle.
So annoying.
No doubt about it.
Well, so annoying.
They never miss an opportunity.
So is that good? I did that whole thing without saying SolarWinds once.
Yeah,
Great.
no, I get it. I get it. Well,
I'm not going to say it either. So, but you're 100% correct, Stephen. This is this continuum that we find ourselves in. Look at an organization like the Linux Foundation, right? Brian, I know you're fairly new to Linux Foundation, but how long is the Linux Foundation? Didn't they just celebrate? Was it their 20th birthday?
Well, so we just celebrated the 30th anniversary of Linux. Right. The foundation, which came out of the merger of two other open source consortiums, has been around for about 17 years.
You know what? So we weren't talking DevOps per se, or by name 17 years ago. But, yet Linux Foundation remains relevant with CI/CD Foundation and CNCF, even the open mainframe, right? With Zoe and stuff like this DevOps has
squirreled its way literally into the foundation, no pun intended, of this whole thing, right?
Yeah. No, there is. So I've given a talk recently about the reciprocal relationship between DevOps and open source. And when you even go to DevOps Days and read the blurb on the founding, why DevOps Days was founded, and it calls out that it was inspired by open source methodologies. You go look at The Cathedral and the Bazaar by Eric S. Raymond, and you look at some of the tenets of open source development, and they directly align with the tenets of DevOps, right? So yeah, when you look at Linux and you look at the founding of Linux, first how the concept was brought to bear publicly and collaboratively. You look at the process for driving kernel development, keeping in mind all of this was sort of in advance of The Cathedral and the Bazaar, if I'm getting my timeline right. But there's been a tight relationship. Now, we've seen an interesting shift even within the foundation itself, right? So the Linux Foundation has always provided key services to impactful open source projects, right? From legal to CI/CD infrastructure, as we now call it, or release infrastructure, domain services, web services. But we also realize, kind of out of this modern DevOps movement, that we need to enable self-service software delivery to our open source projects. So hopefully every open source project can scale to be Linux 30 years down the line. So we've created a tool set called the LFX platform, right? And that is all about everything from giving transparency into security and security fitness and the ability to remediate it for software developers. But when we talk DevOps and other stakeholders, or the cloud native movement, to being able to secure our infrastructure with the click of a button. All right. So, not only have they fed in and inspired each other in the past to get to where we are today, but open source and DevOps are still tightly paired together as we move forward into what's next.
Yeah. Speaking of the Linux Foundation, one of the new efforts which you guys have recently kicked off, the OpenSSF, is also something which Tracy and I are both involved in. So JFrog just upgraded to a premier sponsorship.
Oh, nice.
DeployHub, I believe, is joining soon as well. And I think if you look at kind of the focus of the Linux Foundation, I think they do a really good job of being on the bleeding edge of where the industry is headed to and the sort of problems and challenges which we all need to solve in our software delivery pipelines. So I think if you look at the Continuous Delivery Foundation, which Tracy and I have both been on for a while, that really solves a huge problem in the DevOps space to get your software deployed. Yeah. And looking at OpenSSF, this is, I think, kind of the next frontier, is how do you secure your software pipelines? How do we help open source projects upstream to improve their security, to avoid the sort of vulnerability attacks I was talking about at NPM, JS, and also PyPy, we found a bunch of big security holes in. So how do we secure these critical services, which our entire software pipeline is on and underlies our DevOps infrastructure?
Yeah. Yeah, you actually highlight, again, I talk about the DevOps Trinity. Sorry, Mitch. But OpenSSF, the Linux Foundation, and then ultimately LFX kind of model the people, process, and tools portion of it. So I'm sure you and Tracy are aware that out of OpenSSF is also going to come further development of Alpha and Omega, right? The process of Alpha identifying vulnerabilities, and then Omega, the process of and I'm going to fuzz it up a little bit, of actually in a repeatable way remediating them. And so it's bringing people together, establishing a process, and then putting tooling and technology in place to help support that.
And then bringing data together. We are now in a phase of software development that we can turn data into intelligence. And that's where I get excited. That's what DeployHubs, we're hoarding as much data as we can about all these different components, because the more we have, the more data that we have, the more intelligent our DevOps process can be. We should be at a place right now. I mean, the CDF is working on an event-driven CD pipe, kind of a listener to integrate with CD pipelines. We should be able to take data and start making it more intelligent, just like the LFX tools out there. There's a ton of data in that. So if we look at the ghost of Christmas futures or DevOps futures, I'm betting on really using some of this data and turning that data into DevOps intelligence, because it's time that we do that. We don't have to do everything manually. We don't have to make decisions manually. If we can create self-driving cars, come on, we can create a self-driving DevOps pipeline that can make good decisions, and we get out of the whole approval process and the gated processes. So our software is really liquid, and data is going to allow us to do that.
Mitch, you're on mute.
What's amazing about data is there's secondary and tertiary uses of it. I mean, we've done some research around governance and compliance. We already have seen measurable results of their recognition of having that data, access to that data is impacting their ability to respond to compliance issues as well as reporting. I think there's something else that's really happened I felt the sort of change in the force, if you will, and that's open telemetry, another Linux Foundation project. Here is an open source project, not just changing the industry because a lot of people are using it. So it's in widespread use. It's people. There's our wonder dog here. It's because actually the vendors are banding together to saying we're not going to have proprietary agents. That's not where we're going to differentiate. This is something we can all benefit. Let's really add value in where we add value instead of everybody doing the same thing and forcing 30 agents to run on every app, every system. But it's very cool to see something become that widespread. And I don't know if it'll be Linux, Brian, but it kind of has that, all right, it's got that kind of momentum.
Yeah. Wow.
And we need to be able to have, when it comes back to data, which is, I think about it all the time, and I'm totally a dreamer. Imagine if, JFrog found a vulnerability that everybody needs to know about. How do we know who's using that? Wouldn't it be awesome if we could just blast out to every single person that's been impacted, every single application that's been impacted, and say, hey, you got a vulnerability and it's happening right now. We need to be able to get to that. It's totally possible to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd say, Tracy, first I got to go back because just in my mind when you spoke earlier, I thought Sister Sledge. I have "We Are Family" running in the back of my head this whole time. Sounding a little nebulous, I do think what DevOps has given us in terms of digital transformation, and where we go back to it being similar to open source or Linux Foundation or CDF, is kind of the bus. It's kind of become the connective tissue across related functions. And it'll change, it'll morph, different processes will plug into it, tools, technologies, etc. But it's about that connection that we've made. Now, Tracy, that was triggered by, what if we knew? We used data and captured data to know who was using components that vulnerabilities were exposed in, which then leads me to, I don't know if people here are familiar with SPDX. An open implementation, an open collaboration around an implementation of a software bill of materials, right? This is, again, a concept that has been around forever, at least in terms of bill of materials. I know years back, many companies were struggling with delivering commercial solutions to capture the components and the steps and the activities across the software development lifecycle. And here we go. We get a bunch of invested individuals coming together and defining a true standard of SPDX that then gives us a common framework to go out and start to capture that data. Now, as I clumsily trying to loop it, which then Stephen, empowers us to deal with this next challenge, security, right? Empowers us to bring things like OpenSSF to bear more universally. So I'm kind of talking myself into it, Alan and team. I'm like, yeah, has DevOps helped digital transformation? Abso-freaking-lutely.
Absolutely, it's right. I think, will it continue to play the role that it has?
It will change, and it will continue to be more and more important, but it will change.
I think it's part of our DNA, right? It's part of how we do things now.
Yeah, it has to change. But right now, everything's based around monolithic, and that's, like I said, everything's moving. We're slowly moving to component-driven. No more monolithic. Links are done at runtime. it's the scariest thing ever.
And I think to Stephen's point, JFrog talking about software being liquid, I think it's all liquid. The stack is liquid, the tool chain, all of that stuff. Sort of this idea of, it's this now and it'll stay that way for the next 2 weeks. Now it's probably not. Pick any point in the software stack or the tool chain. I think it's a very dynamic world we're in and entering into.
No doubt about that. I will tell you one thing, though, as I sit here today, right, the end of 2021, what got me into DevOps 8, 9, 10 years ago was security. I really thought it was the best hope for security. It was our last best hope, Obi-Wan, right? And as I sit here in 2021, I still think it's our last best hope. I think what we've done in DevSecOps and security and DevOps has changed the equation in security. It already has. It will continue to do so, and we will do more. And things like the OpenSSF are great.
Yeah.
And it'll continue. It'll continue.
Yeah, we needed it 10 years ago.
Yeah, it's starting.
Happening.
It's happening now. It's happening in a much broader way. People are thinking about it in, security. Security started with an auditor, right? Somebody who occasionally went through and audited or wanted to see if you had an SBOM in a build. It was pretty minor, but we have grown a lot. And even the change, even Kubernetes and microservices obviously offers a new level of security. Poly databases offers a whole different level of security. So our whole infrastructure and the way we're writing software is going to improve security. But because it's so many pieces, it's going to be harder to manage.
All right. So I think we found the answer to why we still need DevOps in the age of cloud transformation and automated machines and all this stuff. Because guess what? Those machines have a lot of viruses. And we need DevOps. We need to shift left with security. We need things like the OpenSSF to be able to address those, to be able to release patches, release fixes for vulnerabilities, to transform our processes. So, yeah, I think you're in a good spot, Alan. Maybe COps wasn't such a bad name.
No, it was already shot down by the boss. So, you know what I mean? I had a great logo picked out too. It was SCA with the O as a gear. PS.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. No, it's done. That ship has sailed. No pun intended. Anyway, guys, we're about out of time.
We're going to do a live roundtable on a similar issue. Sort of has DevOps hit a wall? We're going on. That's coming up. Check out DevOps.com to register for that live roundtable, because if you agree, disagree, have comments on this out in the audience, you'll have a chance to participate in that live roundtable. So we welcome your participation in there. But for now, hey, Brian, Tracy, Stephen, first of all, thank you not only for today, but for your support throughout the years in all that we do here on TechStrong and TechStrong TV and DevOps.com and Container Journal, Security Boulevard, and the rest. Here's to a happy and safe and healthy holiday season and new year in 2022. We look forward to having you guys all on again and continuing our conversations.
Thank you, and likewise.
Thank you.
Yep.
Love you guys.
Everybody.
Mitchell, you want to just Happy New Year, everyone. Mitchell, you want to wrap?
I think we got a great wrap. I think I can't say anything better than these folks have. So, period.
All righty.
Hey, many thanks to Tricentis for sponsoring DevOps Unbound. We will be back with more Unbound in the year to come, as well as this live roundtable next week. But for now, this is Alan Shimel, and we're out.